Chapter 25: Economic Environment and the Role of the Public Sector. Contents: 1. Purpose. 2. Introduction to the economic environment. 3. The macroeconomic objectives. 4. Government economics policies. 5. The economic role of the public sector. 6. The objectives of privatization and commercialization in Nigeria. 7. An appraisal of the performance of the Nigerian economy. 8. Chapter review. 10. Worked examples. Economic environment and the role of the public sector. Purpose. After studying this chapter, the readers should be able to A. Distinguish between the private and public sector of an economy. B. Explain the rationale for government intervention in the economy. C. Discuss government economic objectives and policies. D. State the objectives of privatization and commercialization programs in Nigeria. And E. Assess the performance of the Nigerian economy. Introduction. To appreciate the role of the public sector in the economy, it is imperative to record the distinction between microeconomics and macroeconomics, explain the private and public sector, and present an overview of the public sector in the Nigerian economy. Microeconomics and macroeconomics. The study of economics is often divided broadly into microeconomics and macroeconomics. A. Microeconomics explores the behaviors of individual customers, the firms, and the industry. Specifically, it examines factors influencing the consumption behaviors of individuals and the production behaviors of the firms, how individual markets and industries are organized, and how relative prices of goods and services are determined. It is assumed that customers are rational, seeking to maximize satisfaction derived from their consumption of goods and services, while the firm seeks to minimize costs and maximize profits on production. B. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, studies the economy as a whole. Specifically, macroeconomics is concerned with aggregates such as national output, level of unemployment, the general price level, money supply, aggregate expenditure, levels of investment and savings, to mention a few. Thus, macroeconomics identifies and prescribes solutions to such problems as unemployment, inflation, sluggish economic growth, balance of payment deficit, etc. Private versus public sector. The broad division of economics into two is consistent with the fact that in the real world, every economy has both the private sector, microeconomy, and the public sector, macroeconomy. A. The private sector. It is that part of the economy under the control and directions of non-governmental economic units such as private individuals, organizations, and firms. Each economic unit in the private sector owns its resources and uses them mainly to promote its own well-being. B. The public sector. It is the portion of the economy that is publicly owned. In other words, it is the government sector of the economy, since the activities are under the control and directions of the government. Thus, the public sector includes all government departments and agencies, public enterprises, and all other activities through which government exerts influence on the economy. Public sector in the Nigerian economy. Given the adoption of a multi-level system of government in Nigeria, the public sector of the Nigerian economy covers the revenue raising and expenditure activities of the federal, state, and local governments, as well as all other ways by which these three tiers of government influence the use of economic resources. Thus, the Nigerian public sector covers activities of the 36 states, 774 local governments, the Federal Capital Territory (FCT), various government departments, public corporations such as Nigerian Ports Authority (NPA), Nigerian Railway Corporation (NRC), Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC), Standard Organization of Nigeria (SON), National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control (NAFDAC), various publicly owned research institutions, health and educational institutions, the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN), Bank of Industry (BOI), Nigerian Stock Exchange (NSE), to mention a few. However, the size of the public sector varies according to the political ideology of government. For instance, in an economy in which nationalization has been adopted as a core development strategy, the public sector will be larger relative to the private sector. By implication, the recent adoption of privatization and commercialization strategies in Nigeria is a part of the efforts of the government to restructure and transform the Nigerian economy into a private sector-driven economy. The macroeconomic objectives. Government in every modern economy pursues 5 macroeconomic objectives. These are: A. Full employment. A high level of human and physical resources utilization whereby not less than 94 or 95% of the economy's labor force is engaged in effective production. B. Price stability. To ensure unnecessary upward movement of prices of goods and services, that is inflation, or downward movement of prices, that is deflation. Both inflation and deflation are associated with worsening living standards in one form or the other. C. Economic growth. It is also the primary business of government to promote expansion of the production capacity of the economy to generate increasing flow of welfare-enhancing goods and services. Real gross domestic product (GDP) or gross national product (GNP) and per capita real GDP or GNP are used to measure economic growth. D. External balance. This refers to the promotion of a debt-free and a self-reliant economy. This goal is achieved when a country records a balance of payments (BOP) equilibrium. E. An equitable distribution of income and wealth. To reduce income inequality with a view to ensuring that every citizen at least has access to the basic necessities of life. Government economic policies. The various actions taken by the government to achieve macroeconomic objectives are categorized broadly as follows. A. Monetary policy. This refers to the combination of measures designed to control the supply of money and credit availability in an economy. Monetary policy instruments in Nigeria include Open Market Operation (OMO), Reserve Requirements, Monetary Policy Rate (MPR), which is the discount rate, Credit Ceiling, Selective Credit Control, Special Deposit and Moral Situation. The policy is administered on behalf of the government by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Finance. Monetary policy can either be expansionary or contractionary. An expansionary monetary policy is that which is intended to increase money supply and credit availability in the economy. On the other hand, A contractionary or restrictive monetary policy is that which is designed to reduce money supply and credit availability in the economy. B. Fiscal policy. This refers to the use of taxation and government expenditure to influence aggregate demand in the economy. Fiscal policy can be expansionary or contractionary. An expansionary fiscal policy increases aggregate demand, while a restrictive or contractionary fiscal policy reduces aggregate demand. C. Commercial policy. This is defined as the rules adopted by a country for the conduct or regulation of its foreign trade and payments. It involves the use of tariffs, quotas, and exchange rate control to restrict or promote free trade. D. Prices and income policy. This refers to a set of rules, guidelines, or law devised by governments to influence wage and price movements. The proponents of this policy are those who hold the view that inflation is caused by trade union activities such as work stoppage and strikes to force employers to pay higher wages. The economic role of the public sector. Government performs a wide variety of functions in the economy. This can be classified under 5 headings. A. Allocation function. Allocation refers to any activities of government which affects the type, quantity, and quality of goods and services being produced. Allocation by government includes producing public education, subsidizing healthcare services, subsidizing petroleum products and fertilizers, taxing cigarettes, regulating factory and automobile emissions, constructing roads, and setting prices for electric power supplied by private firms, to mention a few. Allocation activities of government generally are justified if public goods merit goods on the basis of external effects. Public goods are goods or services having the properties that 1. They cannot be provided to one citizen without being supplied also to others, and 2. Once provided for one citizen, the cost of providing them to others is 0. In this category are defense and street lights. Merit goods are goods which consumers will not buy in sufficient quantities if they are not compelled to do so through government. Examples are healthcare services, public education, safety features in a car, and so on. Both public and merit goods are essential to human lives, but will not be produced at all or will not be adequately supplied if left to the private sector. B. Redistribution function. In a market economy, the distribution of income is based on each person's contributions to production, granting differences in natural and acquired abilities. Distribution of income, determined exclusively by the market, will produce high inequality, whereby some people are very wealthy while others are very poor. To redistribute income, government uses tax and transfer payments to achieve a rich to poor redistribution. Tax revenue is used to finance transfer payments in the forms of free education, subsidized public health care services, and other pro-poor welfare programs. C. Economic stabilization. Economic stabilization policies are all policies designed to promote price stability, full employment, and economic growth. It also involves government actions designed to ensure stability of foreign exchange rates and interest rates in the money market. The term macroeconomic stability is used to describe general stability of prices of goods and services, exchange rate, and interest rate, and it is vital prerequisite for economic growth and development. D. Regulation of private business. The function is performed through a regrowth of many specialized agencies of government. In Nigeria, for instance, the Standard Organization of Nigeria (SON) and National Food and Drug Commission (NAFDAC) were established by the federal government to ensure that high quality and welfare enhancing goods and services are produced, as against goods that endanger human lives. E. Administration of justice. The maintenance of the police and services rendered by the courts has important economic consequences. The police is maintained to protect human lives and properties, while the courts adjudicate to sanction breaches of contracts. The level of economic activities and standards of living will be low where people commit acts of illegality and impunity. It is evident from the discussions in this section that government intervention in the economy is to enable it to perform its economic role, which is based primarily on the existence of market failure. Therefore, the market failure reality justifies the need for government to 1. Produce public goods, 2. Produce merit goods, 3. Redress the consequences of goods and services with negative externalities, 4. Reduce income inequality, and 5. Promote economic stability. The objectives of privatization and commercialization in Nigeria. Privatization is the process of transferring ownership, interest, and control in an enterprise from government to the public sector. Commercialization, on the other hand, is the process of making an enterprise self-accounting and self-sustaining instead of depending on the government for its operations and existence. Privatization and commercialization are a key policy in the National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy (NEADS), introduced during Obasanjo administration. The objectives of privatization and commercialization from the perspective of the Nigerian experience have been identified to include the following. A. To enable the government to disengage from economic or business activities in which it lacks requisite competence or in which the private sector is better. B. To make the companies and corporations more efficient by injecting private sector efficiency into their activities. C. To reduce government financial burden brought in the form of subsidies and grants to these unprofitable ventures and deploy the financial resources so saved to other areas that are critical to the growth and development of the country economy. D. To reduce government bureaucratic control, which has militated against the operational efficiency of the affected enterprises. E. To make commercialized companies financially self-sufficient and self-sustaining. F. To improve the quality of goods and services produced by these companies where poor management and acts of gross indiscipline explain poor output. Appraisal of the performance of the Nigerian economy. With a population of 140 million in 2006, projected to 158.8 million in 2010, Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa and one of the 10 most populated countries in the world. Population growth rate averaged 3% during 2004 to 2010 indicating that Nigeria has one of the fastest growing populations in the world. The country is endowed with a large expanse of arable land, abundant crude oil deposits, and diverse solid materials. Thus, the country has a great potential to transform into one of 20 largest economies in the world within a short period of time. However, despite various development strategies and programs adopted in Nigeria since attaining political independence in 1960, the country still exhibits essential characteristics of a developing nation. For example, the agricultural sector incorporates about 65% of the labor force and contributed average of 40.9% to the real gross domestic product (GDP) during 2004-2010, while the industrial sector's contribution declined from 30% to 20.3% during the same period. Capacity utilization in the manufacturing subsector averaged about 54%. Inflation rate 10.2%, while unemployment rate raised from 12.3% to 20.1%. For over 4 decades, the oil sector has remained the dominant foreign exchange earner, accounting for over 90% of foreign exchange income. The overall balance of payments (BOP) persists in deficit, and the debt stock also increased considerably since 2006. The World Bank World Development Indicators 2011 records a gross national income (GNI) per capita of $1,190 for Nigeria. 64.4% of the population living on less than $1.25 a day poverty line, which is consistent with the local poverty index figure of 54.0 during 2004 to 2010. It is not surprising that Nigeria remained listed conspicuously among the low-income countries (LICs) of the world. Some of the relevant measures that have been suggested to promote sustainable economic growth and widespread improvements in living standards include: A. Use of oil revenues more rationally to diversify economic activity. B. Intensify domestic food production and raise labor productivity to achieve food security. C. Upgrade and expansion of economic infrastructures, especially electricity supply, road and rail networks. D. Leverage deposit money banks (DMBs) and rural microfinance banks (RMBs) in support of micro, small and medium scale enterprises for unemployment and growth generation. E. Removal of institutional constraints, especially weak enforcement of contracts and corruption to encourage private investment. F. Reduce cost of governance and harmonize the tax regimes to encourage private capital inflow. G. Liquidity management in the economy must be geared towards improving the liquidity and efficiency of the financial markets to ensure stability of prices, foreign exchange, and interest rates. H. Promote security of lives and properties. I. Lower population growth rate through a combination of effective family planning programs. J. Discourage borrowing of deadweight debts and for projects of doubtful viability. K. Intensify efforts for human resource development and its utilization. Chapter Review. The role of the public sector is critical to sustainable economic growth and development in every developing economy like Nigeria. However, policies and programs of government in recent times at the direction of transforming the Nigerian economy into a private sector-driven economy. The government must take necessary steps to improve the performance of the economy in a way to reduce widespread unemployment, poverty, and inequality. Work examples. Questions 1. Discuss the main objectives of government economic policies in a developing economy like Nigeria. B. Explain the basis for government intervention in the economy despite arguments often put forward in favor of a private sector-driven economy. 3. Justify the federal government's adoption of privatization and commercialization as a key policy in the National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy (NEEDS). 4. Discuss relevant strategies open to the federal government to improve the performance of the Nigerian economy. Suggested solutions. 1. Basically, there are 5 main microeconomic objectives of government in every developing economy. These are: A. Price stability. To curb inflation or deflation in the economy. Both inflation and deflation are inimical to economic growth and development. For example, a widespread increase in prices of goods and services will lower standards of living of fixed income earners. B. Full employment. Every modern government pursues the goals of a high level of employment of resources, especially to ensure that about 95% of the labor force is engaged in economic production. A high level of unemployment is associated with high standard of living. C. Economic growth. The government, through its upgrading and expanding of infrastructural facilities, promotes the expansion of the productive capacity of the economy. Standards of living will improve when greater quantities of welfare-enhancing goods are continuously generated. D. External balance. Government also promotes balance of payments equilibrium, which implies less reliance on foreign countries for goods and services and avoidance debt and its burdens. E. Equitable distribution of income and wealth. To reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, government uses progressive taxes and transfer payments. 2. The need for government intervention in the economy is justified on the basis of market failure. When the market forces are allowed to allocate resources and goods, some people who lack resources and opportunities will be worse off in the economy. A. For provision of public goods. Some goods and services like defense, street lights are non-rival in consumption and not subjective to the exclusion principle. This category of goods and services may not be provided by private firms at all. B. For provision merit of goods. These are goods which may not be consumed in sufficient quantities unless people are compelled to consume them. Examples are education and healthcare services, which are essential to human existence and well-being. C. To promote economic stability. This is to reduce fluctuations in output, employment, income, and prices which may have destabilizing efforts. C. To promote economic stability. This is to reduce fluctuations in output, employment, income, and prices which may have destabilizing effects on economic activities. D. To promote equality in income distribution. The distribution of income in a market economy is based on each person's contribution to production and ability or access to resources. This is usually unequal, and it calls for government intervention to ensure that every person in the society have access to goods and services that support their existence. E. The case of goods with negative externalities. Some people that are engaged in activities that impact negatively on other people's welfare, such as noise, pollution, etc., shall be sanctioned while the victims are compensated by the government. Number 3. Privatization has been defined as the process of transferring ownership interest and control in an enterprise from government to the private sector. Commercialization, on the other hand, is the process of making an enterprise self-accounting and self-sustaining instead of depending on the government for funding. Privatization and commercialization is a key policy in NICS adopted by Obasanjo administration to promote national development. The strategy was adopted to achieve the following objectives. A. To enable government to disengage from business activities in which the private sector is more competent so as to achieve performance. B. To make companies or corporations more efficient by injecting private sector efficiency into their operations. C. To reduce government waste spending in forms of subsidies and grants on activities that are not profitable and use money saved in that process to improve other areas of economy. D. To reduce government bureaucratic control, which has militated against operational efficiency of some government companies. E. To transform some commercialized companies into financially self-sufficient and self-sustaining outfits. 4. Over 50 years after attaining political independence, Nigeria still exhibits characteristics of a developing country. Per capita income is low, unemployment rate is high, and there is widespread poverty. The strategies open to the government to transform the economy and raise living standards include the following. A. Use oil revenues more rationally to diversify economic activity. B. Intensify agricultural practices to promote food security and provide raw materials for industries. C. Upgrade and expand infrastructures like electricity supply, road and rail networks, health and educational facilities to raise economic activities and enhance manpower development. D. Encourage deposit money banks and rural microfinance banks to support micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, especially to eliminate rural poverty. E. Encourage family planning and female gender employment to reduce population growth rate. F. Promote macroeconomic stability to attract private capital inflow, thereby raising the level of economic activities in the economy. G. Discourage contracts of dead weight B with its attendant future tax obligations. I. Promote security of lives and property and eliminate corruption in all sectors of the economy.